Xenoblade Chronicles 3 marks the conclusion of a storyline that's over a decade in the making, which provided us with a bittersweet story about a world doomed to perpetual war that leads to 6 soldiers joined by fate to free it from eternal conflict. That's the general premise at least. So, how'd the final product turn out?
It's the big bad boss. Boom!
Well, that was certainly one of the games of all time. While Xenoblade 1 told a tight-knit story, Xenoblade 2 followed up with a story that had high peaks that matched the original, but undeniably had much lower lows than anything Juju could have done. Xenoblade 3 somehow took that variance and tripled it. There are many incredible climaxes in this game's story, but also some of the worst moments in the series come from this game, making it polarizing to say the least. Now, don't take this as me saying I don't like this game. I adore it to bits, but I'm not going to act like it's perfect by any means. So, what has me hesitant to praise this game as much as I would the other 2 titles in the series? Well, for starters, the lore isn't as interesting this time around, the story has egregious pacing issues, the combat goes from painfully slow to stupidly broken the moment you get a second break guard, and then there's the topic of today's video, the characters. Characters make and break a JRPG as your connection to the world deepens through your connection to the characters, and 3 has some of the best characters in the series, but also some of the worst. In order to explain how I feel about the characters in this game, I gotta spoil the spark out of it, so that's your warning to leave now if you haven't beat it yet, as I'm gonna go deep into this game's plot, and no, watching Donkey's video does not count. Jackass. So, if we're gonna talk about the characters of this game and determine who's the worst, let's start with the main ones. The main cast of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is easily, hands down, bar none, on Klaus, one of the best group of characters I've seen in a JRPG. From Lanza's lovable himbo energy, to Senna's adorable support, to Uni being the boss, every character in this cast is phenomenal. Look, you don't need me to tell you these characters are great, you know these characters are amazing, and while Senna could have had a bit more story in her side story, my grievances aren't with the playable cast, and if this video does well enough, maybe I talk about how much I love them in the only way I know how, by forcing myself to rank them in a YouTube video. Now, with the main cast dismissed, what about that 7th character slot that you get that is taken up by the AI? Thankfully, for the most part, they're also great. As you do more quests in Ionios, you fall more in love with the heroes, and characters you may not be too fond of at the start become amazing by the end of their Ascension quest. I went from taking Uni stance on the suicidal maniac Ashera to, well, still having Uni stance as I'm ready to lay down my life for her. That doesn't make her any less of a crazy bitch, but she's the fun type of crazy, and not that yandere type of crazy that Fiona's best friend was. But she made Fifi so precious to us all, so I'll ignore the trauma she inflicted. And it's not just the waifus who are good too. Although I do love me some Ethel and Alexandria, you have other great characters like Xeon, a guy who goes from a diligent commander forced into his position to a dorky yet somehow still adorable but earnest leader who is Ionios' biggest spud lover. Then you have characters like Isurd, a cunning tactician who harbors a lot of resentment for an attack led by an assassin squad that nearly wiped out his colony, and has a voice actor who did not need to pop off this hard.
Playing me for a fool? I'll show you a fool! I'll blow you away! You and all your rustling phantoms!
Now, are all of the hero characters good in the game? Let's rip that bandage off now. Some of the heroes in 3 are amazing, but there are some heroes who are just drags to interact with and are so sparking annoying. Gondor is a Boondocks character that got isekai'd into a Xenoblade game, and let's just say she makes a strong first impression. Not helping Gondor is the fact that you meet her at the start of the worst part of the game. After coming off the high that was seeing Yoko Taro's influence with the city's ambiance, and sailing the Erythia Sea with the vehicle that really should be accessible in more areas, you're met with this brat. Not helping Gondor's character is how late she joins in the game, and because of this, she doesn't get a chance to develop as we're too busy creating Kojima-length cutscenes here. Also, Gondor just swears too much even for someone like me, and you know that I swear like a sparking mutter. It's just so overused to the point where a badass line like this,
"Guess who's back, bitches?"
just feels lame coming from her. Gondor exists solely for exposition, and while her personality isn't exactly pleasant, she's an 18-year-old who had some questionable parenting with the mouth of a sailor slapped on, so her actions at least make sense to her character. That kinda makes me want to rinse Monica for being a parent who allowed her child to enlist in lost numbers, but she gets a pass for giving us an outfit so blessed by physics that it makes Tyon's Twinkie body look thick. That'll help me cope with the fact that she had Gondor when she was 15 years old, and all of a sudden this picture is no longer the most cursed knowledge I have about this game. As for the next questionable hero, that brings me to Triton. Triton marks a transition from the okay characters to the bad ones. Triton himself isn't a bad character, as he's a grizzled old pirate who wants to travel the seas and, oh yeah, is part of Mobius, but he doesn't give a gull's beak, or whatever the ocean's equivalent of a rat's ass is, fish's gills? Anyways, point is, he's chill, even though his ascension quest had me questioning what I was doing with my life, with just how much of a adventure it was. Although Triton may be one of the most interesting characters in concept, he's easily one of the best Mobius in the game. Here's why that's a bad thing. Mobius are the primary antagonists for Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and they're the most Saturday morning cartoon villains I've seen in a JRPG. Now, depending on the tone of a scene a villain is in, this can work, and Xenoblade has already proven that it can make its hammy villain shine thanks to characters like Metalface and Malos. The problem with Mobius is that they're supposed to be the ultimate threat to the world, except for Triton, despite mostly consisting of bumbling buffoons. Now, there are good Mobius characters, as M and N alone prevent me from completely slandering Mobius as a collective unit, but that's 2 characters out of 25. If you're working with a low double-digit success rate if we throw Triton in there as well, you've really got to consider if you've made a good concept. I know most of the Mobius were made generic given their roles solely exist to develop the heroes via side content, but even some of the plot important Mobius are just awful characters. Which brings me to...
Shania!
Alright, y'all been waiting for this. I put it in the thumbnail for a reason. So, is Shania the worst character in Xenoblade Chronicles 3? Let's start looking at her backstory first, shall we? Shania was born to one of the 6 noble houses of the city folk, meaning she has to bear the legacy of her ancestors. Now, Shania wasn't originally going to be the one to uphold her family's legacy, but both her older sister and father died in the line of action, leaving her to carry the torch, even though she's not really suited for it. This pressure was forced onto her by her bitch of a mother, who is now actively going against the will of her husband and dead daughter. What Shania really wanted to be was a painter, but thanks to her mother's influence, she had to put down the paint and pick up the pistol. Shania was skilled with her blade. Yes, I know it's a Glock, but they're all called blades in the universe, don't worry about it. But she wasn't good enough to be an Ouroboros candidate, further distancing herself from her mother. This causes Shania to abandon her passion for art despite her talent. Somehow, this leads to her deciding to sell at the city's location to Mobius, knowing full well that means certain death for everyone in it, including her mother, who, quite honestly, Sparking deserves it. All in exchange for her to become an Aghanean soldier and join the cycle of stasis that her people are trying to fight against. I think you can see why people don't like her. After pulling an Adolf, Shania just so happens to get reincarnated as a Mobius. Why?
It's because it amuses me.
Oh, we'll get to your bitch ass soon, don't worry. So, because of some idiot at Monolith's decision making, I have no idea, in Senna's side story, you see Mobius S attack the city, because she wants to paint it red and get revenge or some other bullshit. You stop her, she dies. Despite her wishes to be reincarnated constantly, she ends up becoming one of the few dozen people in universe who is dead, completely undoing everything she worked for up until this point. And now we come back to the question, is Shania the worst Xenoblade 3 character? Oh, Klaus, no, she's not even close. I mean, her actions are abhorrent, as I think we're missing some crucial steps in going from failed artist to causing mass genocide, but... Look, y'all know the comparison I want to make here. Just go back like 30 seconds to the video if you haven't pieced it together yet. What really irks me and others about Shania is just how spineless she is. I don't think it's that much of an exaggeration to say that most of us who played this game have probably had it rougher than Shania, especially given how we all went through 2020. She had support from her family to pursue her passion, but once they were gone, she didn't have it in her to keep going. Gondor being Gondor also didn't help, and what makes me hate Shania more is how her existence actively worsens others' characters. The fact that Senna had her side story robbed from her to give Shania a backstory that could have easily fit into the main campaign and even help break up some pacing issues completely baffles me. So, to sum up my thoughts, no, Shania is not the worst character, you got clickbaited, and she's actually one of the better Mobius characters. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I just said that sentence unironically. Ugh. But the fact that she gets her fucked up fantasy fulfilled, only for her backstory to reveal how pathetic she is, makes me, and a lot of other people, not like her at all. But that's better than making me feel nothing towards a character. So if you like Shania, I think I understand where you're coming from. Now if you relate to Shania just a little bit too much, I'd say...
Stop it. Get some help.
Alright, rant over, but there's still other Mobius I want to talk about before I get to the big targets. Let's talk about DJ now. Consoles D and J take the role of Resident Ham for the story of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, but they just flop compared to their predecessors. Let's get the elephant out of the way. Console J is the revived form of the Agnian crew's childhood friend, Yorin. It was a good twist to reveal in Chapter 3 that made the ending stupid hype, but it doesn't go anywhere from there. This is another case of a character just making other characters worse, as a lot of Lance and Noah's backstory is tied to their fates being changed by Yorin, but I don't think they do enough with this. Lance and Noah are still good characters as it shapes them to become more introspective, but what D does for Uni is significantly more impactful. That's where the positives I have for these two end, however. Dirk is just a massive disappointment as he is way less interesting than his equivalents in past games. He's just a psycho with literally no depth to him whatsoever. Malos is one of the best villains I've seen in a JRPG since he knows how to bring the ham, but he can even bring some onions as well as he can get the tears flowing, but Dirk fails to bring either to the party. I feel like your hatred towards Dirk depends on how long it took for you to realize that him impaling Nia with a knuckle laser wouldn't do anything, and since it took me all of 0 seconds to realize that, I just didn't give a spark about him. As for Yorin's conclusion, he sacrifices himself again to save the party, and the message I took from his death just disgusts me. Yorin isn't a main character like he wants to be, therefore the only value he could derive from his life was sacrificing it for someone else. I get that Yorin isn't cool like he wants to be, but his inability to see his own self-worth, even after getting the respect he wanted, pisses me off and is why I despise Yorin more than Shania, less so for his actions, and more so for the message he left me. Sadly, I'm still not done with console slander as I want to get to console C, Chris. Chris is one of the most important characters in the game, and they do nothing with him. I don't think I can stress just how important Chris is to the plot since the game doesn't stress how important he is to the plot. It is no exaggeration to say that without Chris, and Miyabi to a lesser extent, this game does not happen. The reason that Noah and Mio were able to surpass N and M is one part because M said, "Fuck this shit, I'm out," and another part because they both became Offseers. The game relentlessly reminds you how integral this is for Noah's character, as his selfishness now extends to others beyond his own self-interest, and if I keep going about Noah's character here, I will literally just be repeating myself from my video on Xenoblade 2 characters, because I'm just gonna say the truth and y'all aren't gonna like it. Noah is just Rex, only with a much better execution, thanks to being likable from the start, and also being hot as fuck, not gonna lie. Alright. That's the main consoles complete, as we're free to get into what are the actual worst characters in Xenoblade 3 in my opinion. X, Y, and, I know I'm American, but Z. These three consoles are a failed attempt at recreating the Trinity processor. For more information on what the fuck I just said, play the other two games. The reason they failed is because they were supposed to release the information of the world after the Big Bang happened, but instead of restoring the world, they are the reason it is frozen in time as they create Ionios based on the information they receive from people's emotions. When faced with certain death, the natural response was fear and not wanting to go through with this crazy idea. What makes these three consoles so underwhelming is how significant to the world they are, being its creators and all, but having no real motive for their actions. All three lack any autonomous will, despite X and Y potentially believing otherwise. I wish I could feel any emotion towards these three, but I don't. I don't have any angry rant or even feelings of disappointment towards them. The moment Melia hit me with the whole Zed is a concept line, I already knew I was gonna hate this man. The whole game, you are left wondering, why? Why does Mobius exist? Why are they the ones in power? What is their power? How did they get it? Why is the world like this? Well, Xenoblades 1 and 2 give proper explanations as to why their worlds are the way they are. The best answer you get is this.
I hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it.
The way I translate this into the real Queen's English is, this world exists because the AI fucked up. So, we have a neurotic concept as our final boss who is supported by a mad scientist and a bitch. I really don't like Zed for how they are easily the lamest final boss in Xenoblade and have their fight go on for way too long. I mean, you try taking on this boss at 3 AM when you go to work the next day. All I could think of during the fight was two things. One, Melia and Neo are precious and badass and I love them so much. And two, the actual hottest take of this video, Persona did it better, fight me. While Zed isn't the final boss I wanted, the worst character in Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is X. Some of you may not even have fought her in Origin, since you won't see her there if you haven't done Yunie's side story. Yeah, Senna's side story wasn't the only one hijacked by a Mobius. Actually, all of the party had their side stories hijacked by a Mobius, except for Taion because best boy. But X is a side character who is important but gets zero development or explanation for a motive and leaves such little impact that the game doesn't even give them a proper death cutscene. Yeah, easily the worst character. At this point, the only thing that can save Mobius is if Console Ace shows up and is who I hope they are, as they were here at the beginning, and they will proclaim the end. See you guys next time. Peace.